The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across the vast desert landscape. The sky transformed into a canvas of deep oranges, purples, and pinks, a breathtaking display of nature's artistry. Williams, Arizona was bathed in an orange glow, the kind that makes you feel like time has slowed down. The quaint town, with its vintage charm, seemed to bask in the twilight, every building and street corner illuminated in a soft, nostalgic light. We had been driving all day, the endless desert highway stretching out before us like a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the barren landscape. The monotony of the road was starting to get to us, the miles blending together in a blur of sand and sky. Daniel and I, two friends from the cold streets of Toronto, were on a much-needed escape. The desert was a stark contrast to our urban lives, a place where we could leave our worries behind and embrace the freedom of the open road. Williams, a town steeped in Route 66 lore, was our pit stop. The iconic highway, once the main artery of America, now served as a nostalgic reminder of a bygone era. We felt a sense of connection to the countless travelers who had passed through this town before us. The air was thick with the scent of pine and dust, a unique blend that seemed to encapsulate the essence of the desert. An unsettling stillness hung over the town, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. We checked into a roadside Motel 6, a familiar sight for weary travelers. The building stood at the edge of town, its exterior worn by time and the elements. It was a relic of the past, with flickering neon signs and faded turquoise paint that spoke of better days. The motel had a certain charm, a sense of history that made it feel like more than just a place to sleep. The motel clerk, a woman with tired eyes and a wary smile, handed us the key. Her demeanor suggested she had seen many travelers come and go, each with their own story to tell. "Room 107, she mumbled, her voice barely a whisper. The key felt heavy in my hand, a tangible link to the countless guests who had stayed in that very room. It all felt strangely familiar, like a scene out of an old movie, the kind where the protagonist finds themselves in a small town, far from home, searching for something they can't quite name. As darkness fell, the shadows seemed to grow longer, stretching across the landscape like fingers reaching out into the night. The silence was broken only by the distant hum of a truck engine, a reminder that even in the quietest places, life goes on. After settling in, we decided to grab some cigarettes. The night was cool, and the small town seemed to be winding down. The streets were almost deserted, with only a few people milling about, heading home or to the nearest open store. The only place open was a Family Dollar, its fluorescent lights a beacon in the growing darkness. It stood out starkly against the dim surroundings, almost inviting us in with its artificial glow. Inside, the aisles were eerily empty. The shelves were sparsely stocked, and the whole place had an unsettling quietness to it, as if it were holding its breath. Country music crackled from a staticky radio. The sound was faint, almost ghostly, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the store. That's when we saw him. He was standing alone, seemingly lost in thought, yet there was something about his presence that immediately drew our attention. A man, tall and lanky, stood in the candy aisle. He seemed out of place, like a character from a different story who had wandered into ours by mistake. His name was Morgan Quick, he told us. There was a peculiar intensity in his eyes as he introduced himself, as if he were trying to convey something important without words. Morgan had a nervous energy about him. His eyes darted around, never settling on one spot for too long. It was as if he were constantly on the lookout for something or someone. His smile was too wide, revealing teeth stained a yellowish brown. It was a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, making it all the more unsettling. He spoke quickly, asking us about our trip, our plans, his words tumbling over each other. There was a sense of urgency in his voice, as if he were racing against time. His voice was high-pitched, almost childlike, yet there was something about him that sent shivers down my spine. It was a strange mix of innocence and something far more sinister, a combination that left us both feeling uneasy. Daniel and I exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear to both of us that Morgan was on cocaine. His erratic behavior, the darting eyes and the constant fidgeting were telltale signs. Morgan then shifted the conversation to Toronto. He seemed genuinely curious about the city, asking us what it was like and mentioning how cool Canada seemed. His enthusiasm was almost infectious, but there was still that underlying sense of unease. Back in our room, the encounter with Morgan faded into the back of our minds. We tried to shake off the unease that had settled over us like a heavy fog. The room was dimly lit, the neon sign from the motel casting an eerie glow through the thin curtains. It was supposed to be a night of relaxation, a break from the chaos of our journey. We didn't have any beers to help us unwind, so we turned to the internet for distraction. We found a YouTube video about UFC fighter Jon Jones being gay. The video was bizarre, but it was a small comfort in an otherwise unsettling evening. We forced a laugh, trying to bring some normalcy back into the night. The muted drone of the television filled the silence, its static screen casting a blue light that flickered across the room. It was a poor substitute for conversation, but it was better than the oppressive quiet that threatened to swallow us whole. Then the phone rang. The shrill ring startled us, cutting through the fragile peace we had managed to create. It was an old rotary phone, the kind you don't see much anymore, and its sound was jarring in the stillness of the room. I answered. Daniel's face went pale as he watched me listen to the voice on the other end. I could feel his eyes on me, my heart pounding in my chest, as I struggled to find my words. "It's for you," I whispered, my eyes wide with fear. "He knows your name." The words sent a chill down my spine. Who could it be? My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. My blood ran cold. It was Morgan. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. How did he find us? What did he want? His voice was a hushed rasp, sending chills down my spine. "Just wanted to see if you boys wanted to go for a drive," he said, his tone dripping with malice. It was an invitation that felt more like a threat. "Just wanted to see if you boys wanted to go for a drive," he said. The words echoed in my mind, each syllable laced with danger. "Take a spin down old Route 66. Show you around." The suggestion was innocent enough on the surface, but coming from Morgan it was anything but. His invitation hung in the air, heavy and ominous. It was as if the very atmosphere in the room had thickened, making it hard to breathe. I could almost hear the sinister grin spreading across his face, even through the phone. It was a soundless threat, a promise of something dark and dangerous. Earlier that day, we had run into Morgan at the Dollar Tree. It had been a chance encounter, one that seemed harmless at the time. He was acting erratically, knocking items off the shelves and laughing hysterically. His behavior was bizarre, but we had brushed it off as just another oddity in a day full of them. We couldn't help but suspect he was on cocaine. His wild eyes and erratic movements were telltale signs, but we had no proof. His behavior was both funny and unsettling. We had laughed it off at the time, but now, in the dim light of the motel room, it seemed far more sinister. Now his mischievous grin from earlier seemed far more sinister. It was as if he had been planning something all along, and we were just now realizing we were part of his game. We declined his offer. We made up an excuse. My hand trembled as I hung up the phone. A wave of unease washed over me. How did he know our room number? How did he even know we were at this motel? It was too much of a coincidence. We tried to shake off the unsettling feeling, but the fear lingered, a knot of dread in the pit of my stomach. The room, once a haven from the long drive, now felt small and suffocating. The peeling wallpaper, the stained carpet, the flickering fluorescent light above the bathroom mirror. Everything seemed sinister, tainted by Morgan's call. We were trapped, our every move potentially watched. We tried to ignore the growing sense of unease. We flipped through the channels aimlessly, but nothing could distract us from the unsettling feeling that we were being watched. The desert wind howled outside like a mournful cry. The motel wall suddenly felt paper-thin. Every creak and groan sent our hearts racing. We spoke in hushed tones, our whispers barely audible above the howling wind. We convinced ourselves it was just a prank, a cruel joke by a bored local. But deep down, a primal fear gnawed at our insides. We were alone, strangers in a strange town, and something felt terribly wrong. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes I saw Morgan's face, his wide, unsettling grin flashing in the darkness. The phone call played over and over in my mind, his words echoing in the silence of the room. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of our situation pressed down on us. We were trapped in this desolate town, with no way to escape. The more we thought about it, the more we realized how little we knew about Morgan. Who was he? Why was he so interested in us, and what did he want? The questions circled in our minds, unanswered and unsettling. We decided to leave. We packed our bags, our movements hurried and frantic. We couldn't get out of this town fast enough. Dawn couldn't come soon enough. We went down to the front desk, our footsteps echoing in the empty motel lobby. The motel clerk, her face etched with suspicion, listened to our story. She seemed unsurprised, as if she had heard it all before. "He said he was your cousin," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "He said you were expecting him." Her words hung in the air, confirming our worst fears. Morgan Quick was not who he said he was. As the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, we pulled out of Williams, Arizona. The engine roared to life, a comforting sound in the stillness of the desert morning. We didn't speak much on the drive, the events of the night still fresh in our minds. Every time a car approached from the opposite direction, our hearts would skip a beat, fearing it might be him. The vastness of the desert, once awe-inspiring, now felt menacing, hiding secrets we didn't want to know. We left Williams, Arizona behind, but the experience left an indelible mark on our souls. We had stared into the abyss of human darkness, and it had stared back. We often talk about that night, our voices hushed, our eyes darting around as if Morgan Quick might be lurking in the shadows. The encounter with Morgan Quick was a chilling reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, hiding beneath a veneer of normalcy. We may never know what Morgan's true intentions were, and perhaps it's better that way. Some mysteries are best left unsolved. But the haunting question remains, what if we had accepted his invitation for a night drive on Route 66?